Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we have the Retribution Paladin Mythic Plus only guide for Season 2 of the War Within, Undermined. Couple disclaimers about this video. This video is going to focus solely on Mythic Plus. If you want a little bit more comprehensive of a guide, I recommend you just checking out the regular 11.1 guide that I put out a few days before this video. You can check that out. It's going to be a little bit more comprehensive. It's going to have stuff related to the raid in it and stuff like that. This is Mythic Plus only for people who only do Mythic Plus, only engage in Mythic Plus, and don't want to raid or don't go into the raid or anything like that. So if you are interested in stuff like that, like, ooh, what is there a raid weapon or raid trinkets that I want? I highly recommend you watching the other guide. This is, as the title would suggest, a Mythic Plus guide. The other thing is about Mythic Plus, I always call Mythic Plus a dynamic form of content. And what I mean by that is it can change very largely depending on variables such as group composition, such as which dungeon you're in. You know, you might run different talents. You might have a different priority, right? Based on what's in your group. How much AoE damage another spec does compared to you. Maybe you need to focus more on priority damage. Maybe your group is doing really bad AoE damage and you need to focus on AoE damage. Things can change a lot in Mythic Plus. It's kind of what's fun about it to me, is that dynamic aspect of it. And I was actually asked a question on the Ret Guide video. It's like, would you ever use this talent setup versus this talent setup? And most of the time, the answer to that is, yeah, maybe in Mythic Plus. It depends on what your group needs. It depends on what your group composition is. If you want to get into the nitty gritty of that. For the purpose of this, I will be giving you like an overarching, framework to work with, right? We won't get into every single possible talent build that you could use for every single possible aspect, even though I know there are some people that would be interested in that. All right, so with those disclaimers out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to talk about is your stats. Now, stats, again, as I mentioned always, are not the most important thing to go by. You kind of, in theory, would want to simulate your character for stats. However, we will give just a broad overview of what kind of stats you're looking for. And so obviously strength, main stat, is very good. And then you're going to want mastery and crit. Crit is already very good, but it's especially good for AoE, especially good when you're doing, the trash pulls in a Mythic Plus dungeon. So critical strike, very, very good. And then haste, you do want like a baseline of haste. I would say somewhere between like 10 and 13%, somewhere in there. Kind of feels playable and allows you to kind of do your rotation properly. So you do want like a baseline of haste to get up to that point. But then after that, you kind of want to stack crit mastery on pretty much any piece you can after that point. And then versatility, that's fine. Versatility is valuable in Mythic Plus. It helps you survive a little bit sometimes, but it's not going to really help your DPS that much as a Ret Paladin in its current state. So that's kind of the stats. Strength, mastery, crit, haste, verse, and that's kind of where you want to go with that. So let's move on to hero talents and talents. So hero talents wise, we are, just like we have been, just like for everything else, we are going to be playing Templar most of the time. Herald of the Sun can be competitive in Mythic Plus. In my experience, it requires you pulling very large pulls though. So if you want to do more overall damage, you're going to want to do Templar, but if your group is pulling really, really big, you can play around with Herald and see if you can surpass. The overall talents won't really change much. There's stuff you can play with on the overall talents, but we're going to focus on Templar here because it's going to be the most reliable and what's going to be best for most people who probably aren't pulling giant groups in their Mythic Plus runs. So Templar, for the choice nodes, you're just going to have Zealous Vindication and Sanctification in the bottom left. Obviously, everything else you just fill out. I like to run Charger on the other choice node, but it doesn't matter for DPS-wise. It doesn't matter. So, Templar, for most cases, if you want to play around with Herald of the Sun, you can be competitive. Just keep in mind what you did with Templar. Keep in mind what you did with Herald. And if, if you're doing similar, then you can play Herald. And if not, I would suggest playing Templar. Let's go ahead and talk about the Paladin side talents here. We're going to focus on Mythic Plus type things, right? And some of these talents won't be needed for every dungeon. As we talked about, it could be very dynamic, right? You might not need Cleanse Toxins for a certain dungeon at all. And so therefore, it would be pointless to take it technically. But we'll talk about all that. So when we go through here, obviously we're gonna have lay on hands. I will also put the build below in the description below, so you can just copy it if that's all you want to do. We have lay on hands. Obviously we have the abilities we can't choose from. Cleanse toxins. There's going to be some dungeons where it's useful. There's going to be a Xal'atath bargain where it's useful. We'll go over the Xal'atath bargains as well in the video. Fist of Justice, I would always take this. Blinding Light, there could be arguments, especially in certain dungeons, to take Repentance instead. Blinding Light, just in general, is going to be good. It's also good with one of the Xal'atath's bargains. Turn Evil, and then there's like a Mass Turn Evil and stuff. You don't need that stuff. You start with Greater Judgment already. Lights, Countenance. So this is going to decrease the cooldown of your Repentance or of your Blinding Light. It basically removes the cooldown of Repentance. So that means you could just cast Repentance constantly. That can be valuable. And then Blinding Light, it just allows you to do it a little bit more often. Especially useful on weeks with the Xal'atath bargain where you need to disorient all the little orbs that spawn. So Lights, Countenance helps a little bit with that. Obviously Divine Steed, Healing Hands for your own safety, Cavalier, Freedom, Rebuke. Now this is a talent you very well could take because it does technically do throughput, punishment. It just does it does a Crusader Strike when you successfully interrupt. You should always be interrupting. So technically a little bit extra damage if you take punishment there. I typically don't, just because I like some of the other points better, but you definitely could take punishment there. Sanctified Plates, your main defensive tankiness. Unbound Freedom, increasing the speed with Freedom and also freedoming an ally as well. This is very important in a lot of Mythic Plus dungeons to be able to freedom an ally from being rooted or having an effect completely nullified by casting it on them, and also putting it on yourself as well at the same time, and also increasing movement speed. So it kind of does a lot. Divine Toll, one of our main damage abilities. Obduracy. Sacrifice is very dangerous to use in Mythic Plus, but you should still take it for emergencies. At the very least, if someone's about to die, you can sacrifice and then bubble and then negate the damage coming into you while they're sacrificed. So I would at least take it. It's very dangerous to use, especially the higher key you do on Mythic Plus, but I would at least have it available. Divine Resonance, Blessing and Protection, Consecrated Ground. I like this one mostly for the Divine Hammer. We're going to be playing Divine Hammer this tier, and I do like to take some Consecrated Ground for that reason. Unbreakable Spirit, Divine Purpose, Holy Aegis, Lightforged Blessing, Lead the Charge. Again, that's not mandatory or anything, but I like to have that. Inspired Guard, Vengeful Wrath, that's throughput. Lightbearer, don't have to take that. Seal of Might is throughput, and Of Dusk and Dawn is throughput, so I do recommend taking all of those that actually increase your damage. You have other talent points to play with, such as the Sanctified Ground, such as Light's Countenance, such as Cleanse Toxins if you don't need it for any particular dungeon. You could technically play around with Obduracy as well. Tons of stuff to play around with. You know, you have to get down here somehow, so you either have to take Lead the Charge or Holy Ritual, so you have to take something there, but you also can play without Lightforged Blessing, for example. Let's go ahead and move over here. And on the Ret side, we're going to have an update to the actual Ret Paladin guide with the talents. So I'm actually in the talents right now that I recommended for Mythic Plus in the overall guide. And these talents are still fine to use right now. And so we're going to go through them, and then we're going to talk about what to change after you get your tier set in this patch, okay? So at the beginning of the patch, these are fine just to run right now. You could change it to the new ones as well. So we'll get to the new ones and you can change it to that as well right now if you want. They're very close already. And in fact, a lot of these talents are close depending on what you choose. It's going to have very small impacts on your overall damage in Mythic Plus. So obviously we have to take Blade of Justice, Divine Storm. We're going to take Swift Justice here, Expurg, mandatory. And then we're going to take Improved Blade of Justice. This is one of the ones that's going to change, though. We're going to have Art of War. We're going to have Guided Prayer. We're going to take Final Verdict. If you played Season 1, we're going to drop Jurisdiction, and that talent point's just going to move its way over here to Divine Hammer. Why Jurisdiction? I got asked this question. Why Jurisdiction? Why Jurisdiction? It's just because if you just start taking other talent points off and testing, you're going to just notice that even though Jurisdiction's a good talent, the other ones just do slightly more. So like Blades of Light does slightly more damage than Jurisdiction does, and you need a talent to get down to Blades of Light, so you need to take High Lord's Wrath, right? So that would be an option perhaps to get rid of, but you can't. And so you just run into a situation where you can't really lose anything else because it's almost mandatory, and or does more throughput than Jurisdiction does. And so that's just the way it is. Is there stuff to play around with? Absolutely. But generally speaking, that's going to be what you're going to do there. Tempest of the Lightbringer, Crusade, skip that talent node. 2 points into Zealot's Fervor. Blade of Vengeance. This one is another one that's going to change. I was actually asked about this. Holy Flames has always been good in Mythic Plus, especially with Herald of the Sun. Holy Flames has always been good. It's going to get even better with our tier set, and so that's going to be another talent point that we're going to end up switching. But again, at the beginning of the patch, if you want to run Blade of Vengeance, it does make sense to do that as well. Divine Hammer, Crusading Strikes, Boundless Judgment, High Lord's Wrath, Wake of Ashes, Blessed Champion, Empyrean Power, Penitence, Shield of Vengeance, Defensive, Abjuration, Blades of Light, Execution Sentence. No extendo on the Execution Sentence. We want to make sure this is actually hitting in Mythic Plus. I also asked the question, why no Final Reckoning? So Final Reckoning got buffed a lot. However, it just still isn't that much. It still isn't that good. And the reality is, it's just so hard when Execution Sentence is only 30 seconds and pairs with every single Wake of Ashes, every single Wings, essentially, because of Radiant Glory. It's just hard to break that when it fits up so perfectly with it. So Final Reckoning, it's definitely something you can play around with, especially if you are doing the Herald of the Sun and you are doing really big pulls. I would love to see logs and people playing around with Final Reckoning just to see. Again, with big pulls, Final Reckoning is going to do more damage. So I would like to see that. But generally speaking, if you're pulling one pack at a time, Execution Sentence is going to do you just fine. We have Seething Flames, we have Burning Crusade, we have Searing Light, we have Burn to Ash, and we have Radiant Glory, which is, like, unfortunately for some people, one of our main talents because it gives us more wings. So those are kind of the basic setup there. And then we'll go ahead and switch these to what they're going to do. So now let's say you got your 4 set. We're going to talk about the tier set in this video as well. You got your 4 set. Now you can switch to Holy Blade and Holy Flames. You could play this right now and you wouldn't really notice too much of a difference. Holy Flames is definitely the more important one to switch over, in my opinion, especially with the tier set. It's already viable now without the tier set. And then Blade of Justice, this one's a little bit less impactful. This one's just basically trying to save you a talent. Like it's like not really doing anything, because once you have the tier set, you're going to be spamming Divine Storm in Mythic Plus or Final Verdict. You're just going to be spamming your spenders because it's going to keep proccing, and you're going to have 4 free ones to spend. And we'll go over the tier set, like I said. And so this gives you 2 charges of it. And so you're just sitting there with charges of it and not using it. Whereas in Season 1, the tier set benefited you just using those charges as fast as you could, essentially. So it's just trying to save you that. It's not that big a deal. If you prefer the playstyle of Improved Blade of Justice, it's not going to make a big deal on the overall on the meters. This is a very small detail that you could go over, but this is what you're going to see probably in like all the other guides and stuff, is Holy Blade eventually taken here. But you don't have to. If you want to play Improved Blade of Justice there, you can. But I do recommend you switching over to Holy Flames if you aren't already playing Holy Flames in Mythic Plus. So that's kind of where we are on the talents. We'll click Apply there. And I think that's about it for the talents. So let's go ahead and move on to Ability, Priority, and Rotation. So this is kind of simple, I guess, especially for Rat. So obviously, we're going to focus a little bit on AoE here because it's Mythic Plus. So when we start a fight, first of all, we have Divine Toll. So it kind of changes a lot of things when it comes to AoE. So if your Divine Toll hits a lot of things, right, and then you have max Holy Power, well, you're already at max Holy Power. So you can actually start a pull with Divine Toll if you have no Holy Power. That's a perfectly viable way to start it. So let's say we did that. So I'm at 5 now. Now I can go ahead and get my Divine Hammer started. So I'm going to start my Divine Hammer on this guy right here. I'm going to Execution Sentence, and I'm going to Wake of Ashes. I'm going to Hammer of Light, and now I'm going to go between my Justice, my Blade of Justice, and my Judgment, and I'm going to Divine Storm whenever I can. It's literally that simple. You're just kind of getting started. Get to 5 Holy Power. If you're already at 5, pull to pull, and that's great. And then you're going to Divine Hammer. Then you're going to Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes. Fit the Divine Toll in there. So in that instance, right, we use Divine Toll to get our Holy Power. But let's say we were already at 5. So let's get up to 5 Holy Power naturally here. Okay. So I'm already at 5 Holy Power. We'll wait for Divine Hammer to come off cooldown. But in this case, we're already going to have 5 Holy Power going pull to pull and Mythic Plus, and kind of show you just want to fit in your Divine Toll to max out your Holy Power, essentially. So you're going to want to basically use it after your Hammer of Light, right? So we're starting the pull. We're going to Divine Hammer. We're going to Execution Sentence. We're going to Wake of Ashes. We're going to Hammer of Light. Now we're going to Divine Toll, and now we're going to spam our Divine Storms, free Hammer of Lights, and of course our other abilities as well. Now, with this talent the way it is, you might get small pockets with the Holy Blade talent, you might get small pockets where you have nothing to press. This is very unlikely to happen once you have the tier set, just to be fair to that talent choice there. So there was a slight change on single target, because you might need to know how to do your boss opener, right? And so I will be doing an update to my regular guide for this. If you also watched the regular guide, I will be doing an update with any small changes that I've found, and obviously I've had another week to simulate stuff and stuff like that. So it's always important for the rotation. I always point this out to people. The rotation on Wowhead is what you should probably use in one way or another. So the person who does Wowhead, Bolas, he also writes the API for the raid bots or whatever, right? So for the simulations. So if you simulate your character, it's running what's on Wowhead for you, right? And so even if you think it's wrong and you want to test against it, you should know what it's telling you to do. So essentially, there's a different one for Bloodlust versus non-Bloodlust. I'll get into that more in my update video. But let's just say this is just like a regular pull with no Bloodlust. You're just going to the boss. You have no heroism or Bloodlust. You're going to want to build to 5. So we're going to go ahead and Blade first. And then we're just going to build all the way to 5. It's going to end up wasting some Holy Power, at least 1. Then we're going to Divine Hammer. Then we're going to Execution Sentence into our, of course, Hammer of Light. And then we just start doing normal things. So Judgments and Blades of Justice. Hammer of Wrath, only when you need to. Use procs like Empyrean Power when they're up. Use Divine Purpose when it's up, right? Use your procs when they're available. And then that's kind of be how you do your single target rotation. The only thing different from that, you might say that sounds extremely similar to what you said in the other video. The only difference is that you are building to 5 before your Divine Hammer instead of building to 3. So in that case, it had you building to 3 Divine Hammer, and then it had you then using Judgment, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes. And what that did is it put a global between your Divine Hammer, an extra global between your Divine Hammer and your next spender, which was not efficient. And so it's actually better to, build to 5 first. Even though you're wasting Holy Power, likely wasting Holy Power, or if you have this talent set up, you will be wasting Holy Power with Holy Blade here. You'll be wasting Holy Power no matter what, because you're going to do 6 Holy Power minimum. Plus you might waste another one with auto attacks. If you're able to get, so if you're starting with 1 Holy Power, then it becomes a lot simpler, right? Because then I can go Blade for 2, Divine Toll, it's hitting other things somehow, so it gives me 5, but it gives me 4, and then like my auto attack filled in my 5th, let's say, right? In that case, yes, now I can just Divine Hammer, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes. I already have my Judgment ready to go because I didn't have to use it, and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the only difference there. The general rule, build to 5, Divine Hammer, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light. And that's kind of like the order you want to go with. As far as potions and stuff go, and use on-use trinkets, use those right before your Wake of Ashes, essentially. So you build up a little bit, and then pop your stuff before your Wake of Ashes. You want to make sure that's empowered, and that's kind of where you want to pop your trinkets and your potions is around there. So that's kind of how that works. Hopefully I explained that pretty well, and the difference for anybody who watched the other video. It's very slight, but it can be important, especially your opener. Let's go ahead and talk about the Xal'atath bargains for Season 2 and how Rep Paladins handled these. So we do have one change to Xal'atath bargains. So if you played Season 1, you already kind of pretty much know what to do. But if you didn't, we have Devour. So Devour is going to put a little debuff on yourself. You're going to see it when I'm in a party. I have my party frames right here. You can see the debuff on yourself. You can also visually see it on yourself. And then you're just going to cleanse toxins, and it's going to take it off you. Simple as that. You could technically then dispel somebody else's in your group as well if you want to be super helpful, or the healer's just not doing it, or your group is full of people that have no dispels whatsoever, or they didn't talent into them. So cleanse toxins, we'll take that right off. That's how you handle Devour. Voidbound. Voidbound will be when there's an ad spawning. You just need to switch to that ad and kill it. Now, if you notice that your group is really bad at switching to it, you can even put your cooldowns into it. It will live long enough in a high enough key for your execution sentence to hit on it if your group mates are not switching to it. If everybody's switching to it, then you do not want to put like your execution sentence into it. But if they're not, you actually can do it, and you can kind of handle the Voidbound, each Voidbound by itself. And it can actually really help your group, because let's say the other two DPS are refusing to switch to it. You can kind of just handle it by yourself and make the run really, really smooth. So that's actually kind of a highlight there for Rep Paladin. Ascendant, that's the one where we need Blinding Light for. You can also use Hammer of Justice and Interrupt, but those are going to be the little orbs that cast, and you just want to go stand in the middle of them. Oops, you pressed the wrong button. And Blinding Light them, disorient as many as you can. You can sometimes hit all of them with one Blinding Light. If there's still another one left over, you can go ahead and individually interrupt it, or you can Hammer of Justice it as well, to remove as many of them as possible. You can always get like 2 of them with interrupt and Hammer of Justice, but with your Blinding Light you can obviously get a bunch of them. And when Ascendant is active, I would always recommend having Blinding Light over Repentance. The new one is called Pulsar. So Pulsar replaces those little orbs. If you played Season 1, there was little orbs that would spawn, and they would like slowly go towards the enemies, and you need to soak them before they got to the enemies. So now you're going to have a ball that spins around you and your teammates. And when you soak the ball, it's going to do a chunk of damage to you, but it's going to give you a buff. So you're just soaking balls that are spinning around your teammates. Obviously, you can't get your own because it's spinning around you. But you want to soak them because they're going to give you a buff. I believe that buff is Mastery and Leech for that particular one, for the new one, Pulsar. And you just want to soak these. So, I mean, there's no real... it's very obvious when you see it. The ball is quite large. So, if you look at this, whatever it is next to me here, the saddle or something here, it's like at least as big as that, if not bigger. And it spins around your character like the moon orbiting the earth or something, right? And it spins around your character, and you can go soak other people's. It does do damage to you, and somebody will need to soak yours. And that's all for the Pulsar one. All right, next let's talk about the tier set. So we've already mentioned the tier set, how it might change your talent build and stuff like that. Very easy to play around, but you do kind of want to know how it works. You'll want to acquire this tier set, replace it with, especially when you get the 4-piece of the tier set from your previous tier set in Season 1, if you played Season 1. If not, just put them on as you get them, obviously, if you didn't play Season 1. So for the tier set, basically, the 2 set just is going to give you a damage buff, right? And it's good when it's up. It's good. It gives you a nice damage buff. And then the 4 set is when you lose your damage buff, it's going to allow you to have 4 seconds where you just get to spam your spenders. So you get to spam Divine Storm or Final Verdict, right? Essentially. And so basically how you play around this is when it procs, because it could be a little jarring at first. So what happens is, let's say you're at 5 holy power, right? And you get the proc where you lose your buff, but you get to spam your spenders. So you're at 5 holy power, you use your Divine Storm, and then you immediately go back up to 5 holy power. Divine Storm 5, Divine Storm 5. And so you're just constantly overcapping your holy power at this point, just with Crusading Strikes. And so you just want to spam your spenders when it happens. And you'll notice when it happens, you can get a weak aura for this. This would be a decent thing to have a weak aura for. In my opinion, it's pretty obvious when it happens, but If you do need a weak aura for it, you could get a weak aura for this to let you know, okay, I'm spamming my Verdict, I'm spamming my Divine Storm right here. And you're just going to want to go ahead and do that. Spam your buttons for this, and just try to get all of your globals into that free period of your spenders there. So that's pretty much how the tier set works. It's pretty simple. That's why it's even better with Holy Flames, because it increases the damage Divine Storm, and you're pressing Divine Storm more often than you are other buttons because it's going to proc more, especially Mythic Plus, right? And so, and then also, like I said, you're not going to be spamming your Blade of Justice anymore because you're going to be spamming your spenders. And so that's kind of why the talent change is what we talked about earlier from this. And so it's very simple to use. Don't need much about it. You don't need a weak aura, in my opinion, but you could get a weak aura, especially to tell you when you have free holy power, just to spam your spenders there. So that's how the tier sets work. All right, next, let's talk about Trinkets. So Trinkets is very interesting for Mythic Plus. Interesting in kind of a bad way, in my opinion, but let's get into that. So there's one trinket right off the bat that I can just tell you that you're going to want to target. And that trinket is going to be from Operation Floodgate. And that's going to be, let's look at the loot here. Where is it at? This one. This Pacemaker, okay, from Floodgate. So you're going to want to run this. This is good. This is just a really good trinket, okay? So you want to get this from your vault at max level if you can, but obviously it's good even if you get it from doing your plus 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. You want to get this trinket. It's very, very good. It's like the most home run trinket, in my opinion, right now for Mythic Plus, and so you're going to want to focus on that. The weird part about the trinkets right now is when you go to simulate your character, a lot of the trinkets that are going to simulate the best are actually not even max eye level trinkets that you can get from weekly activities. I'm not sure if those can also go into your vault, but either way, they max out at the hero item track level if you can get them from your vault. But these things are like from doing weekly things. So like doing like theater troupe and stuff like that, right? Doing just weekly activities outdoors in the world, right? And so one of them, I wrote some of them down, but there's multiple of these that are very, very good. One of them is the Spelunker's Candle. One of them is the Funhouse Lens. That one might be specifically from Undermined weekly stuff. I'm not sure if that's specifically from Undermined or from any of the weekly stuff. But Funhouse Lens and Spelunker's Candle are two of the examples of some of the best trinkets that simulate in AoE, or AoE plus single target environment. And so I'm hoping that gets changed and they buff some of the other trinkets, because that's crazy to me. Like if you're a mostly Mythic Plus player, you're not gonna be like, oh, I want to go to a theater troupe and get my trinket. So I hope that's not the case for those players, that only do that. I do all kinds of content personally, but I hope that's not the case for those players. So I will give you, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you two other trinkets that are kind of decent that come from Mythic Plus. And so for that, we are going to go to Priory. Again, this is not a great trinket, Signet of the Priory, but it's okay. You can use Signet of the Priory. It's an on use, so you can target when you use it to pair with all your stuff or whatever. So you'll have Priory of the Signet of the Priory from Priory of the Sacred Flame dungeon. And then in Motherlode, so if we need to go to BFA on this list because it's not updated yet. Where's the Motherlode? Right here. So we have Razdunk's Big Red Button. So again, this trinket is not great, but the damage it does is scaled pretty well, and it can be something you use. Now, in that same vein, if you get from Cinderbrew Meadery, there's like a Buzzing Bee trinket or something like that. The Honey Buzzer. That one's also similar to Red Button, right? So you can use these trinkets as well, but it's kind of like you have the Pacemaker, and then it's like a bunch of outdoor trinkets are the next best. And then so it's like if you're not doing that stuff or you're not going to get that on hero track level, it's like, okay, well, what am I going to use? And basically anything you can get your hands on at this point. I don't know if they're tuned bad. I don't know if the simulations are bad. But the trinket thing seems to be a little bit, sketchy right now, at least for Ret Paladin for Mythic Plus. They are not simulating well whatsoever compared to some other things. There are some raid trinkets, but we're not going to get into the raid trinkets. If you're interested in the raid trinkets, just go watch the other video, click on trinkets, and watch that part. It's going to be somewhat similar to what I'm saying here. But the pacemaker, for example, is good in both. So that will definitely be mentioned there. So yeah, that's where we are with that. And it's a little bit weird to me, but what else can we do? Next up, let's talk about this Circe's Circlet. So this did just get nerfed. I called that, by the way, my other video. A bunch of people were like, why would it get nerfed? It did get nerfed. I imagine it'll probably get nerfed again, would be my guess. They like to just not over nerf. I think it'll get nerfed again. However, as of right now, you'll probably be using this trinket. You'll still probably use this ring for the entire season 2 in Undermined here. You'll probably still use it as of right now. What happened was legendary skippers got nerfed, and legendary skippers could proc the one that procs everybody's stuff at 150% power, and so it's procking everybody's everything at 150% power, and it just kind of like was like a chain reaction type thing, and so that got nerfed, which was a big source of its power. And so right now, so it went from being like ultimate best to now it might, if you simulate your character, it might at least be worth simulating against like a myth track ring, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if it got nerfed once again after this. Not a lot, but enough to where the myth track ring is clearly better, where it's obvious to put it on. In which case, right now, it's not obvious to put on a myth track ring over the Circe's Circlet. So it did get nerfed once. I'll include this in my update video as well, as well as the opener change thing. But yeah, this got nerfed. You might be wondering if you need to wear it, if you need to go back and get it. As of right now, you might want to go back and get it, but I do think it might get nerfed again. That's just where I'm at, though. That's just my opinion. I was right the first time. That doesn't mean I will be right once again, and that they will nerf it again. All right, next, let's talk about crafted gear plus embellishments. Basically, I'm going to suggest doing the same thing that I do in for raid for this, and that's just putting, so I'm just going to be repeating myself from the other video, but I would just put on the crit, the Dawn Light crit lining on your gear for embellishments. If you want to embellish the least impactful stuff possible, it'll be your bracers and your cloak will be the stuff that you embellish. Me personally, I do bracers and belt. That's just because I'm a blacksmith and I can just craft them myself. But if you want to, do max damage, max theoretical damage, you would do like your bracers and your cloak, and you would put Dawn Thread on them. There are other options that you can use in Mythic Plus. It's not a home run. None of the embellishments are like top of the line, in my opinion. There's so little difference between it. If you look at the season 1 logs, some people will have the Dark Moon embellishment, but a lower 3-item level lower weapon towards the top of the logs. Many people, or most, will have the crit lining at the top of the logs. You could even have like random focusing lens, or I can't remember what it's called. It might be called focusing lens. There's another embellishment that's decent. And, people could even have that. It doesn't really matter. We're talking really low damage there. Just make sure you embellish your gear with something. It would be my thing there. If you have, like, no way to get a myth track weapon reliably, then in that case, what you can do is you can put the Dark Moon... you can put the Dark Moon enchant on your weapon, and then put the other Dark Moon, the one that makes the Dark Moon proc or whatever, on your bracers, for example. You can still do that if that's what you did in Season 1. So if you were a Dark Moon enjoyer in Season 1, you can do that, especially if you don't have any way to get the raid weapons. So that's something you still could do. It's going to be very minimal whether you do that or the crit lining. Crit is very good in Mythic Plus, remember, so the crit lining can be quite good there. Let's wrap this up with consumables, enchants, and gems. This, again, you can mostly find all this in the 11.1 guide because it's going to be pretty much the same, except for I'll say to value crit even more in Mythic Plus. So instead of mastery plus haste, as long as you have like 10% haste or 11% haste or whatever, like I have 12%, I would go, at that point, I would go like crit mastery on your gems instead of haste mastery on your gems at that point. And then for the main stat gem, you still want to do the crit effect with it, so it's primary stat and critical strike chance or whatever, critical effect, whatever that diamond is the one that you'll want for that particular gem. You can see I have mastery haste on mine. That's, again, because I'm at the low end of the haste area. Plus I also do things other than Mythic Plus. And so that's what you want for your gems. For your enchants, mastery on your rings, avoidance on your cloak and bracers, strength on your chest, stam or speed on your boots. So there's like Scout's March and there's like Defender's March, I believe. Authority of the Depths on your weapon would be the best choice there. And you want the Stonebound Armor Kit on your legs. So that should be it for consumables, enchants, and gems, and everything like that. So I think that's everything here on this guide. Hopefully that's comprehensive for everybody. Again, just like I kind of mentioned it a little bit, how dynamic Mythic Plus can be. I try to make the guide for somebody doing a +2 and maybe even help somebody who's very good at the game who's doing a +20, but maybe didn't know one minor little thing or didn't think to try one minor little thing. And so I try to help a range of people. You know, I'm not even at the +20 level on Mythic Plus specifically, right? I'm more like comfortable in that +12 level. Like I can do whatever the max level is for my rewards. You know, I'm not the top end player Mythic Plus by any means. A little bit better in rating, but I'm not like the absolute toppest player. But I still can maybe offer insights to help those players as well. So I do try to do that too. But mostly we're trying to, you know, get the core of the player base helped is what we're doing in these videos. So that's it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel because that helps me out a lot. If you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to check out the Patreon. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.